Sup, Dad?
Welcome to This Dad Reads, a bookish podcast spanning genres and fandoms. I'm your host, Jason, and on today's episode, I am joined by none other than Claudia Gray, the much-beloved Star Wars author. What is going on, my fandom friends? I hope everyone is doing well out there. I am particularly excited for today's episode. I have been so thankful to have been able to have numerous Star Wars authors join me on the show so far, and hopefully not the only time that they ever join me on the show, but I am particularly excited to have another first. So I have Claudia Gray joining me today. We had an awesome time connecting and chatting about all things Star Wars, including her love of Andor. So if you are a fan of Andor and a fan of Claudia, stay tuned for that conversation in just a little bit. But I wanted to get this episode kicked off, as I usually do, with my last current next. So the last book I read was Star Wars Inquisitor, Rise of the Red Blade by Delilah S. Dawson. I talked about this on my last episode, and I still can't say that much about this book as there are embargoes held on reviews right now, but I will just say that I really enjoyed this book. It was a really unique take on kind of Star Wars villains and kind of their backstory. And just gives a very unique take on what it looks like to go from the light to the dark side. So that book is coming out July 18th, and my review will most likely be coming out on that same day. And I'm just going to say it now, say a prayer, put it out into the world that I hope we can get Delilah on the show and talk about this book in a future episode. The current book I'm reading is Hard Contact, the first book in the Republic Commando series by Karen Travis. This is the Essential Legends Collection paperback version that I'm reading, and I am enjoying it so far. I haven't gotten super far in yet, so at this point, I'm still kind of like getting the lay of the land, figuring out what the characters are, what the story is. If this is one of those books that you have enjoyed, please let me know what I'm in for, and I'm excited to dip into Legends. I've only really dipped my toes into Legends. These Essential Legends paperback collections have really been the things that have helped me dive into Legends the easiest. It can get very overwhelming, as you know, just with the amount of titles that exist in that kind of sphere of Star Wars books. So following these releases and honestly reviewing them for Tatooine Times really helps me stay on track. And I'm kind of just taking the lead from, Lucasfilm and Del Rey to kind of guide me to which books I should read next. So I recommend doing that. If you kind of don't know where to start and kind of are lost in all of the canon versus Legends versus all of that stuff, the Essential Legends collections is a great way to kind of help guide you, because they kind of just hand it to you, like, here's these books you should read. And obviously they look gorgeous. Each of them have new stunning artwork, which is always a pleasure and a joy. So more to come on that book, and my review will be coming out on Tatooine Times very soon. And the next book I'll be reading is Yoda Dark Rendezvous by Sean Stewart, another book that just came out in the last wave of Essential Legends collection. So I'm excited for this book. I don't know anything about it. Once again, some of these Legends books I just have very little context or knowledge of. And so Yoda is one of my all-time favorite Star Wars characters. So I am particularly excited to jump in and see what kind of story he's a part of. All right, KC78, are you as excited as I am to talk to my next guest? Definitely. She is the writer of such Star Wars books as Bloodline, Master and Apprentice, and one of my favorites, Lost Stars. I would love to introduce and welcome to the show, Claudia Gray. And so here we are. Welcome to the show, Claudia Gray. Hi, Claudia. How's it going?
It is going great. How's it going with you?
It's going good. It's, we're creeping up on summertime. The kids are about to be out of school. I don't know what that means for you, but for me, it kind of is just like this wide open possibility of schedules,
There are 5 schools within walking distance of my house. So frankly, it means I can actually drive somewhere.
Yeah, I bet.
For the next 3 months.
I bet, yes.
It's like I actually have a chance of moving along the streets.
It's the little things sometimes. I want to start off our
It
conversation
is.
because it wasn't that long ago that you were at Star Wars Celebration again, the Star Wars Celebration 2023. I know that was
Yes.
probably a kind of unique experience for
And
you. Maybe if you want to share about maybe if people don't know what was going down, but how was it for you?
yeah, yeah, Lucasfilm brought me over to talk to fans, which I was so looking forward to doing. And I was literally even going to be just like sitting somewhere going, please talk to me about Andor. I have been unable to talk about anything but Andor for the past 6 to 7 months. Please talk with me about it. And instead, I first came down with laryngitis, and then that turned into 2 bouts of bronchitis. And it was like
Oh
five
my
weeks before
goodness.
I was okay again. And at Celebration itself, I could barely speak. As you know, if you were at any of those panels, I could croak out a few words, and that was it.
Yeah,
I
I was
was
watching on the
I was
live
sick, and
stream.
on the one hand, yeah, and I thought I was really doing well, and all these people have been really sweet, like on Instagram or via email, going like, "We could tell you felt terrible." Like, true, but
Thanks,
okay,
guys. Thank you. Yeah.
true, very true. Yeah, yeah. Last year was, I got to go to all these things and really have fun, and it was tremendous. And then this time, there were even a couple things I was supposed to do that I was just like, I have to go back and lie down in my hotel room now. That's all I can manage.
Sure. Oh wow,
Oh
that's a
well.
bummer. But I'm glad
Yeah.
that you were still, able to participate and experience some of those things that I know it's not very often that the author group gets to get together. So I hope that it was still worth it and that you
Yeah.
were able to have some sort of, little bit of enjoyment.
Yeah, I mean, it's always great to be around the fans and to be around that energy. Um, you know, it's always going to be a little bit blurry in my mind, mostly because I was running a fever. But it was a good thing. And hey, I'm going to be going to other conventions this year, and so I'm still going to get to pin people down and make them talk about Andor for hours.
Hey, and you know what? I don't have those on my list of questions for today, but now we have to talk about it. We'll talk about Andor, I promise. Loved it. So we'll get to it. We'll get to
Okay.
it.
Oh my, yeah.
So good. So I cannot believe that we are like multiple years now into the High Republic initiative. Like, I'm sure that's like
I
crazy for you to believe as
know.
much as it is for the fans. And for, a lot of us have been around from the start, and it's wild to me that we are years in. So what has this experience
Hmm.
just been like for you? I mean, we are in 2023. This has been a years in the making process for you and the rest of the folks involved. So like, can you not, I guess in this point of your life and in this time of 2023, what has that experience been like for you?
It's still a little surreal, to tell you the truth. I mean, for the longest time, this was a thing that we were doing in lockdown, and we'd already started having Zoom calls before everybody started having Zoom calls. But that was such a huge part of my life during lockdown,
Mm.
because I was basically either talking to, my husband or to people about the High Republic. Like that, those were the conversations I was having. And for the longest time, it was this thing in our heads, and it got postponed a little bit just because everything got postponed during lockdown. We're like, what is this going to be like? Are they going to go with this? We didn't know if the fans were going to be willing to take this trip with us. And I don't know how you guys have kept up reading it. I 100% don't know how we've kept up writing it. Uh, I could definitely say that, like, we were like, when the first books came out, we were all like, oh, thank God they're going to put all this stuff in Wikipedia and we could just look it up. We could just look it up because, it's hundreds of
Yes.
characters. And even if you're dedicating yourself to this full time, sometimes you're like, wait, who is so and so? What color is their lightsaber? So it's been great to just have all that get reinforced. And as people listening to this probably know, I kind of had to take a step back in phase two of the High Republic just because I had other books that had to get written. And so I just did this comic for phase 2, but as everybody now knows, I am returning to write a novel in phase 3, and I'm very, very psyched. It's going to be one of the books that closes out phase 3. So I'm very excited to get to do that. It's a privilege.
That's amazing. That's the perfect segue, I would say, because my next question was about that one shot, Quest of the Jedi, your contribution to phase 2, like you said. And yes. I don't know if you know this or if the word got to you, but Claudia, this comic like completely sold out and was like nowhere to be found. It was incredibly hard to get.
I did not know that.
Yes. I don't know what...
That doesn't mean somebody didn't try to tell me, but I was sick for 5 weeks.
Okay. Fair.
I missed a few.
Fair enough. And again, maybe, I don't know if it was maybe that was like something that the author didn't need to hear, because maybe, I don't know how that happened, but all I can say is the demand was really there for this comic. And I know in the comic book world, first appearances are a thing. And so I think that was a big factor of it. So anyway, now that you know that, I guess... What is your reaction to hearing that? I mean, fans were like eating this one up, and I was very looking forward to it as well.
That is awesome. I hope that the ones that got it liked it. That was very much like, if I could have picked just one thing to do above anything for that phase, and I did partly have, I mean, obviously I had say in it, but it was something that was needed doing. And I was like, okay, I can do that. And that's the number one thing I would have wanted to do, because the mysticism of the Jedi is very interesting to me. And Barnabas Vim is a mystic, and a mystic not exactly like we've seen much of before. Somebody who really believes in symbol and metaphor, the dreams and visions like the ones that Luke has on Dagobah in the tree. The evil tree that we've just never quite gotten any explanation about how the tree turned evil, but okay. Like, this is somebody that's almost his whole experience of the Force. He seeks those dreams and those visions, and he interprets through that. And, the editor was sort of like, we're looking for something very Arthurian. And I think it was 2019. I don't know. Did you happen to see this movie called The Green Knight?
No.
It starred Dev Patel, but it's a retelling of the Green Knight myth from the Arthurian legends. And it was really well done, because so much of the Arthurian stuff we've gotten in the last 20 years is like, gritty action remake. And it's been a long time since anybody's really gone at it, looking at all the psychological, like Jungian levels to the Arthurian stories, of which there is a lot, like so much. And that movie really did do that, and really inhabited this murky, misty world where you're seeing all these things that are both like very realistic or very fantastical, or all in the same shot. Like, there's one scene in that movie where the knight is hiking across this muddy field, and you see the mud in his shoes and how hard it is. And in the background, just left alone with some moss growing over it, are the remains of a dragon skeleton. It's just this moment of like, if you lived in a world with dragons, you would sometimes see that.
That would happen.
Or Alicia Vikander played one of the women in the tower that he meets. And they had a thing where she claimed images, but they had it sort of worked out almost like it was early photography, with all these vats of these chemicals and sunlight and the long visions. Obviously that's super ahistorical, but their Arthurian legends aren't historical. They're about image and mood and metaphor and what they pull out. And part of the movie, I was going like, am I with this? I think I'm following this. But then at the end, like, the meaning of that story hit me more powerfully than it ever has before. And I was like, whoa, that was incredible. And I don't know if I managed to do that in Quest of the Jedi, but I wanted to show somebody who that's his relationship to the Force. That's how he interprets it. That's how he connects with it. That's how he receives its wisdom.
That's awesome. And I know all of the like lore lovers and lore masters in Star Wars were just eating it up, right? Because it was like so dense with that stuff, and that's not always the case. Like that's not the point, or should it be, of every single Star Wars story. But it was so rich in that sense, and I think a lot of people just appreciated that, and they love stuff like that.
And it was also fun because, I mean, the High Republic is a time that's sort of legendary to the characters in the main, in the Skywalker saga. And Barnabas Vim is somebody who's maybe legendary to the High Republic. He's a little bit further back. And that was really, really interesting to me, to be like, okay, what did they look back to? What's their legendary character? And to get to embody that with him was really great.
Yeah. And that, a flashback within phase 2 was already I don't want to say flashback, a prequel to a prequel,
Yeah, you have no idea how many flashbacks. It's like little Russian nesting dolls. We're just going to keep going.
Exactly. You're also a part of the YA anthology coming up, which is coming out this fall. So I know all of those stories have been announced, and everyone's just like, foaming at the mouth for all these stories. But I just need to know that there's a Geode origin story in your, like, somewhere on your hard drive. So people are just like craving that Geode, or a Geode one shot. I'm just gonna throw it out there, Claudia. Like, the fans want it.
I can't get into any more detail, but as those who heard like the 6 words I was able to say about this at Celebration, I can say Geode is in that anthology.
Woo! All right. Okay.
And I was so excited coming into the High Republic to write the Jedi, and it's been great, but I've really gotten attached to the crew of the vessel and the way that they sort of find their path through the galaxy, as eccentric as it is.
Yes, as has everyone else, and I love it. It's so good. A lot of people. I'm stoked for the YA anthology. I can't wait for that. I think it's a super unique way to like tell stories, and I know you probably can't say much, but I think it's going to be a really fun way to kind of like dip in at different points and just tell some of those.
Yeah, a short story isn't necessarily like a lesser thing than a novel.
100%.
Like sometimes it's really very liberating to have the ability to focus exactly on, one person or a few people and a few specific moments in a way that a novel sometimes is not really able to do. And I think all of us got to write stories that we felt very strongly about.
That's so fun. And again, another perfect segue. I was wondering if your creative process, how does it differ when you're writing, say, like a comic book, a one-shot comic versus a series or versus a short story? Or does it really differ that much? I guess, how does your brain work, and how do you kind of engage with those stories as you kind of are doing slightly different works?
I mean, comics and graphic novels are necessarily different because, it's one thing you say, like, you let the pictures tell a lot of the story, which is true. But, the first graphic novels I did were for DC, and it was a trilogy. And I was well into the first book before the knowledge let the pictures tell the story. It's one thing to know that, but it's another thing to have your creative imagination respond and start thinking in terms of the images and actually using them instead of you having to translate it. And I was like, oh, okay, here this is. Now this works. And so, obviously that worked out great for the story of Barnabas Vim in particular, because we get to see the visions, we get to experience them the way that he does and draw that kind of wisdom from them, which, I could tell that in a story, but it's not going to have the same power as it is for, in a situation where somebody can see the vision and can actually have that same kind of immersion in it. I don't know that the difference with the stories in the novels is so great, except obviously, the amount of story that you need, the number of beats that you need to hit. I guess it really is sort of what we were just talking about. Short stories, you're concentrating on one thing. And with novels, you're trying to work on a broader canvas and probably with more characters.
Sure. Are you I was talking to Lydia King about this, and she obviously had she was like she was telling me how nervous she was, coming into Star Wars and the amount of characters, like you mentioned. And she said she's like a Post-it note person. Are you a Post-it note person, or are you like how physically do you?
I should be a Post-it note person. Like my life would be easier if I were a Post-it note person. But, it's kind of interesting, actually. Over the last couple of years, I've really been tinkering around with my process a little bit. I may yet become a Post-it note person, but for a long time, I've always been an outliner, and I think I was trying really hard to sort of move away from as much outlining, and then I realized, no, in fact, what I need to be doing is outlining more. I actually need to. I'm somebody who really, really loves that structure, and I don't see it as separate from the writing process. Outlining is writing. It's just working on the macro issues before you work on the smaller issues and before you get into the actual prose and rhythm of it. It helps me. Any aspiring writers out there, I do always say there's no one right way to write. If you make great progress without outlines, great, go for it. But, I'm tinkering around with this, and I've always been drawn to outlines, and I'm kind of getting a little bit more into structure rather than less, I think. So that's critical for me, and it also helps to talk things through a lot. I'm very lucky that my husband is a huge Star Wars fan and is available to hear about all of this in a lot of detail all the time.
A blessing and a curse, maybe?
Yeah.
I will say the same topic came up with my conversation with Lydia. She said her husband's a really big Star Wars reader, but does your husband does he beta read for you? Does he go with you along the process? Because I know Lydia was saying her husband, he doesn't want to do that. He's not an editor. He's not a copywriter. He just wants to read it. So how does your husband how has he engaged with it? Is he fully in the High Republic? Is he just reading your stuff?
Yeah, my husband. He's a huge Star Wars fan. Sometimes he beta reads for me. It's sort of, does he have the time, to do it? Because obviously he has his own job. And also Star Wars, our deadlines are not super long. And sometimes I don't finish something in time for him to get a good look at it. Okay. But it's always good when he is able to. He, most notably, is sort of his idea that led to Geode. And, it's, and he has a really great sense of it as a fan. Yeah. That sometimes when you're writing it, you run the danger of losing track of that. That said, I am back to total mainlighting pure fandom with Andor, which is great. Yes. I'm oh, thank goodness, able to have this energy 100%, which is great. So, but yeah, he does read definitely the short stories and sometimes the books when there's time for the books. And, in a lot of ways, he's the first fan who reads it. Oh, and I'm able to sort of say oh, okay, this is a way some other fans are going to react to this, or, thinks he's more interested in. It's oh, maybe we need a little more of that, That's so cool. That's awesome to have that support. So I think we should transition to Andor. So it seems like you are just aching to talk about Andor. So what did you love about the series? What kind of drew you back? Why is Andor the thing that makes you just a rabid fan now again? Because it's the greatest Star Wars in a minimum of 40 years. It's so good on so many levels. I'm not kidding. I could talk about this for many hours, but I will say, kind of the short version, I thought it was extraordinary. I thought it was incredibly well written, and it was inspirational in a way, because I feel like it opens up the door for the kinds of stories that we can tell with existing intellectual property. You know, this is serious adult drama about what makes a fascist dictatorship work. How does a rebellion come into being? What are the moral gray areas there? And yet you've still got droids and space battles and all of this happening at the same time, which is amazing. I've rewatched it many times. I mean, it's over 5.
Wow.
You know, and it's probably inching closer to 10 at this point. And still, I'm getting more out of it. I mean, in a lot of ways, even apart from it being about Star Wars, like, it is a masterclass in storytelling in terms of setup and payoff and so many other things. Like, one of my favorite things, and this isn't even like one of the things that I really love. Spoilers for Andor. If you have not watched it, I demand that you stop listening to this right now and go watch it, and you will thank me, and you will be so happy. All right, for those of you who have now watched it, we have that dinner party scene at Mon Mothma's, and Perrin is with her, and they're having that conversation with the couple where you realize that Chandrila marriages are arranged for teenagers. And right at the moment where you realize that, they pull back for a long shot of the party, and Leia walks across the screen. It's episodes before we're going to get to the fact that her perhaps becoming betrothed to somebody is going to be a plot point. But they hit that note. That is not accidental. That is very, very deliberate. Or one of my favorite things, and this is really just Tony Gilroy showing off, but I'll allow it. Episode 3, Luthen Rael and Cassian Andor are speaking for the first time in that sort of enormous heavy engine storage area. I don't know what's going on there. But, and of course, the Corpos come to raid it. And Luthen is showing off his badassery for the first time. And I think it's rule number 2. It's like, he says, always build your exit on your way in. How do they get out of that room? The underground tunnels in Ferrix. What forms the entire core of the way Cassian is able to do what he does in the finale? The tunnels under Ferrix. That is Tony Gilroy building his exit on his way in. And I'm just like, I salute you.
So good.
Yeah. It's so good on so many levels. And I cannot wait for the second season. And I know that that's going to be the last season of Andor, but I am like, I'm sending up prayers to the universe that Tony Gilroy is going to want to do something else in Star Wars.
Yeah, don't leave Star Wars, Tony, please.
Yeah, no, there's got to be something else he'd want to tell. And it's smart, and it's emotional, and it's beautiful. The design on it on so many levels is just fantastic. I mean, my God, Cyril Karn's mother, that character, everything about the way she's dressed and the actress that they got, who's wonderful, Catherine Hunter, it's so specific. It's not a type. It's very specific. And the fact of this person, this tiny little stick insect of a woman who still dresses in the fashions of back when she had a little bit more money and more options in life, it adds dimension to that entire world. We've seen the very, very wealthy of Star Wars, and we've seen the really poor of Star Wars. We've never been in a middle-class apartment on Coruscant, But things like that, it adds texture to the entire GFFA. And I'm going to try and stop there because I'm not kidding. I could talk about this
Well,
probably 4 or 5 hours.
I will say
joy.
this. Yeah, and like we'll keep this in the episode. My producer Jeremy, he's on the recording. I'm sure he is like aching to jump in and talk about this because at a certain point, Jeremy and Philip helping him with the show. Me and Jeremy were all about Andor. Philip had not watched it yet, and we were just like, "Come on!" Like this is just what you said. So these conversations are happening with everyone everywhere who just has the same love and passion for it. I'm thinking about other conversations too from some of my other Star Wars friends when it was airing. It was like, oh, is Luthen, like there was all these theories like, is Luthen really a Sith and and I was like, guys, I don't think this is that kind of show, and that's why it is amazing. Like I don't need that's not needed. Like
you don't need the big turn on this. I actually think it is possible, like fan theories have convinced me it's possible that Luthen might have been a Jedi or might have been in training when everything happened with Order 66. There are just reasons why I think that may be possible, but you don't need that. All you need to know is he's somebody who is absolutely dedicated to the fall of the Empire. And if it turns out that he was a Jedi back in the day, like it explains why he has a whole lot of kyber crystals around, but it doesn't fundamentally change the story.
Right.
You know, the story is who he is as an individual.
Yes.
Not what category we press him 100%. Into.
And I will say the same thing. Like I'm a reader. I love books. I was an English major, and it's like media. Like I love all that stuff, and it felt so. The pleasure of watching something visual like that, with that amount of depth and care and art, it felt like reading an awesome novel. Like that's what it felt like, and.
Yes.
You know, it was so fulfilling in that manner. Yeah.
Yeah. The more that you look at it, the more it rewards you. You know, there's so much there. Like another of my favorite things, and after this, I'm going to stop. Okay. You know, at the end of Aldhani, right before there's getting started in the mission, Nemik is going, I don't understand. I have faith. It ought to sustain me. Yeah, but he couldn't sleep the night before. And he's like, you sleep like a stone. And then you get to the end of the Narkina 5 arc. And they've said the night before, like, that everybody's figured out they're not getting out. And you go and you see Cassian lying in his bunk, and he's wide awake. You know, he cares about somebody about other than himself now. And he can't sleep any more than Nemik could. So, sorry, that's just so another really great touch. Yep. And the fact that they have the restraint not to call your attention, like, look, we're doing a thing. Look, like they trust you to get it.
Yes, trusting the audience. So and that's what I love about books. It's like you have to, there's so much, there's a level of trust that you have to have as a writer when you're writing something on the written page. But so many times in visual, it's like it's fed to you. And so a lot of that is lost. And that's why, you know, there's an argument like the books are always better than the movies or whatever. But, I just feel like when it's artfully, carefully, beautifully done, there's no distinction between how the story, what the medium of the story is. It's exactly.
But yeah, Andor invites you to bring your own ideas and experiences. It allows you to make your own call to a degree. Like, is this the right move? Is this the wrong move? Like, morally speaking, we're in a gray area and all the characters know it. You know, it's things like Luthen railed, that whole thing where he's just railing at Mon Mothma, you know, going like, if you didn't know this was going to be taken, and then you see him at the end of it after she walked out and you're like, he wasn't talking to her. He was talking to himself.
Yeah.
You know, he was convincing himself that he had done the right thing. Which is just incredible.
Exactly. I have some catching up to do, so I definitely need to get on it and do some more rewatches. So I think I have my summer homework.
Yes. And I mean, we actually, my husband and I were like, we're not going to rewatch it for a month. Okay. We're just going to stop for a month. But I think we're about ready to go back in.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Well, speaking of visual media, and this is an audio podcast, but I have the Young Jedi Adventures poster behind me. I just got that, and so it's really cool seeing some High Republic stuff going into different forms. And I'm really hoping, and just seeing what seeing what I saw about the Acolyte at Celebration, I'm just like, it seems Andor-esque, and it seems like the showrunner gets it, and like I'm so stoked, and I'm really excited about that. I know all the High Republic people are as well.
Yeah, I'm psyched to see it. I mean, you basically know what we know about it, but at the same time, it's really thrilling to see the gold robes and Vernestra. And
oh my gosh.
I know, to see these elements actually being, actually coming out into the wider universe of Star Wars.
Yeah.
And it's wonderful to think that the High Republic, is taking that place and is actually really being accepted and brought into canon, which I am delighted by.
100%.
So yeah, that is absolutely terrific. And I have to say, I'm super psyched about the Young Jedi Adventures, just because, I love the Clone Wars. I love Rebels. I love Visions, but Star Wars has really needed an animated show that's primarily for kids.
Yes.
For a really long time. And I love that we finally have that. And it's so great and bouncy and energetic because, that you don't, I mean, I'm in my 50s and I'm like, I need more Andor now. But we also need, for fandom to be feeding, the youngest fans too. And I feel like Young Jedi Adventures really does that.
100%. And as a father of younglings myself, I can't always convince them to watch the things that I think they should be watching. And my daughter has watched Young Jedi Adventures. It's her Andor for you. She's watched it over and over.
Yeah.
She loves Nubs. And I'm like, it makes my heart so happy because I'm like, they did it. This is the show. And it's not dumbed down. It's not like dumb kids TV. There's like plots, and there is, it's fun. Like you said, it's bouncy and colorful, but it's exactly what that age range needs. And you're right, there has not been that in Star Wars in a really long time. And so it makes my High Republic fandom heart so happy that, she loves Nubs and knows all of their names and knows all the plot lines. Yeah. Like, it's awesome.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Right? Someday, maybe in like 20 years, then we'll start doing the Andor binging. So for now,
yes.
Speaking of other works, you just had another book come out, The Late Mrs. Willoughby. You're on tour for it
yes.
Right now. So tell us a little bit about that.
The Late Mrs. Willoughby is the second in what's going to be a series of at least 4 murder mysteries, which began last year with the murder of Mr. Wickham. And I call them my Jane Austen, Agatha Christie mashup. And in the first book, there were characters tied to all 6 of Austen's published novels, gathered together at a house party. And Mr. Wickham, the bad guy of Pride and Prejudice, in the tradition of many Austen bad guys and a lot of Agatha Christie villains too, turns out to be involved in more than one scheme, and everybody there turns out to have a reason to hate him. And of course, he winds up dead. And I set the 6 Austen novels in different years during sort of the 20-year period during which she worked on her books and published them, 15 to 20. And so we're able to actually, the 2 sleuths are the daughter of the characters from Northanger Abbey, and then the son of Elizabeth and Darcy from Pride and Prejudice. And they become these sleuths. And in the second book, they visit the world of the book Sense and Sensibility. They're in the village of Barton. We're revisiting those characters. And if you're familiar with Sense and Sensibility, you know immediately why the death of Willoughby's wife would be a very powerful moment in that village, and that many, many characters could have their reasons for what happened there. So I'm actually editing the third book now. I can't say much more about it, but in some ways, writing mysteries has been as big a shift as going from prose to comics. You know, it's one thing to know every mystery character is lying about something. What is it? Only a few of the lies are about the murder, but you have to figure out what the lies are, and they have to be in play all the time. You know, it's one thing to know that, but it's another thing to be like, oh, you know, the imagination begins to work with that.
Sure.
And use that as its raw material. And I feel like that comes out much more as the series goes on, and I'm having a blast with it.
That's so fun. You're also writing with Disney Books, I believe, the Haunted Mansion novel, Storm and Shade, that's coming out later this year as well.
Yes.
So that sounds fun. As like, you're just like mysteries, like other Disney properties. That's so fun.
I'm getting to do all the fun stuff. And, you know, the Haunted Mansion in California, each of them has a slightly different appearance and backstory and etc. Well, the one in California is canonically in New Orleans, where I live. And even though I've had a lot of story ideas set in New Orleans and played with them, this is the first book I'm actually publishing that happens in New Orleans. And it was great to actually get to put in some local flavor and really weave it into this city, which was wonderful. That's really coming out in August, I think.
Wow, that's so fast. Okay, great. I'm really excited for that one as well. I will say too, Claudia, like after I read, when my whole Star Wars journey started, Lost Stars was the first book that I read, the first Star Wars book that I jumped into. And like many people, like completely blown away. Like that's my go-to first recommendation for everyone who asks me where to start. If my opinion means anything to them, I just say start with Lost Stars. You will love it, and then go pick your adventure, choose your own adventure. And after I read that, I was like, I love your writing, first of all. And so I had to go. I was like, what else can I get? And I just have to say this right now on the podcast that I highly recommend Claudia's Constellation series. The Defy the Stars, Worlds, the Fates. So good. I've recommended it to so many friends, Claudia, and I just want more of it.
Thank you.
So selfishly, like I love them so much. And it was like, and it's a little bit sci-fi. It's like young adult. So I feel like there's a lot of similarities between it and Star Wars. It's kind of that futuristic vibe. And so I just have to say, as a fan, thank you for that series. I love it. I will always be a fan of that series.
Well, thank you. I'm so glad that you read it. I mean, when you write Star Wars, you always hope that a few of those readers are going to read your other stuff. And some people do, but whenever it does happen, you get really psyched. But yeah, that one was fun. I pitched it as Blade Runner meets Casablanca. And I feel like that got to come through.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, before I ask my last question, are there any, you mentioned a little bit earlier before, are there any upcoming conventions or signings that are on the docket for you for the rest of 2023 where fans can meet and engage with you, maybe when you're healthy?
Yes. Here in New Orleans, Blue Cypress Books has been doing Regency-themed murder mystery parties to support the series. I believe that the June one is already sold out, but there are a couple slots left in July, if you hear this in time to get those spots. They're amazing. They serve refreshments and drink, and it's a murder mystery specifically written for the event.
Oh, how fun.
And everybody tries to solve it together, and it's awesome. Let's see. I think it's called Washington State Comic-Con in Seattle in late June. Yes, late June. I believe that I'm going to be at that one. I will be at Dragon Con Labor Day weekend. And there's another convention in there that I am forgetting right now. But
no problem.
If you follow my Instagram or my Twitter, Sarah keeps my Twitter updated and I keep my Instagram updated, and you will be able to see where else I am out there.
Awesome. Well, the last question I have for you on my show, every episode I talk about my last, current, next. What was the last book that I read? What am I currently reading right now? And then what am I planning to read next? So that's what I want to ask you. What is your last, current, next?
Okay, I'm trying to think of the last one that I finished. Sorry, whenever anybody asks me this question, all of a sudden my brain is like, have I read a book? I don't think so. I can't be right. I do know currently I am reading both a book called Ascension. I can't remember the name of the author at this moment. It is sort of a sci-fi thriller that takes place on this mysterious mountain that has appeared in the middle of the ocean that is higher than Everest, and anybody who lands upon it begins to realize right away something is seriously up. I'm also working on Spare by Prince Harry, which is fun. They got a really great ghostwriter for it. And all I will say, I will not retell the full story, but I actually have a friend who back in the 90s had personal experiences with both Princess Diana and then Prince Charles. And all I will say about that is that I'm inclined to believe Harry. Let's put it that way. The last book I read was actually, I can't remember the name of it, but it was the last Maisie Dobbs book.
Okay.
Written by Jacqueline Winspear. It's a long-standing mystery series. I've been a huge fan of that for a long time. And then next up, what will I be reading next? Because there are a whole lot of things. When I was up in Wichita recently, and there's a great bookstore there called Eighth Day Books. And its core mission is Christian mysticism, but it's just a general bookstore. Okay. Like, it began, and there's also still a really good Christian mysticism section, but you can find a whole lot of really interesting books on there on a lot of topics. And the next one might be a biography of the Emperor Nero. I'm a little bit of an armchair history buff about the Roman Empire.
Okay.
So I'll be digging into that. Probably nobody out there is like, yeah, I'm going to pick that up. But that's exactly my speed, apparently.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining and chatting. I really hope that you can come back again when some of your other books come out. I would love to talk Haunted Mansion more, and obviously your other Star Wars books coming in the future. So as a fan and as a representative of the Star Wars community, thank you so much just for your contributions. We cannot wait to hear more from you in the future. So thank you so much for joining. Thank
you for having me. I had a lot of fun, and I got to talk about Andor.
Oh, yes, achievement. Happy to do so. Happy to help you with that. I want to say a very special thanks once again to Claudia Gray for joining me today. I had an awesome time talking with her about Andor at length. I have a lot of catching up to do, and I'm sure by the time this podcast airs, she's probably watched the series at least 5 more times, right? So I loved also kind of just getting her take on her inspiration behind Quest of the Jedi and that one shot, and there is so much more coming from her in this year, as we talked about, inside and outside of Star Wars. So I'm really hoping that I can get her back on the show in the future to discuss all of those things and more. Thank you guys so much again for listening. If you liked this episode, please give me a 5-star review on your podcast platform of choice. It really, really helps out getting those reviews in, and I would love to share some 5-star reviews on the show in the future. I'll catch you guys next time. Thank you so much for listening. For more of my content, visit my website at thisdadreads.com for full book reviews, interviews, and articles. Follow me on socials at thisdadreads on Twitter and Instagram. This Dad Reads the podcast is produced by Aravis Industries and me. Special thanks to my editor, Jeremy Tuttle, and to Coma-Media for the use of their song Bounce. If you like what you've heard, please subscribe on your podcast platform of choice and leave me a 5-star review. It really helps. Catch you next time.